social scientists, welcome back to Research Methods. Today we're looking at reliability and validity. Now we've kind of touched on this a little bit throughout the year, looking at certain studies that have good internal validity, maybe not good external, but this is where we really need to delve into the different forms of validity and reliability and how we go about assessing and checking that our research is valid and reliable. So a quick recap quiz then, 6 questions based on what we've looked at over the past of year 12. So pause this now, check what you know, check what you don't know, make a note of it, and then that can guide some of your independent revision over the summer. So we've got the Oedipus complex taking place in the phallic stage. So this is where boys are more likely to be, well, apparently, wanting to be with their mum and kill their father. Data skew, if it's positive and negative. If it's negative, it skews to the right. Positive, it skews to the left. Once social change has occurred, its origins are completely forgotten by the majority in a process called social cryptomnesia. This is where we cannot remember something that's taken place. It just becomes our day-to-day. It's things like recycling. The Yerkes-Dodson law in memory was about how anxiety can trigger both good recall events, but also have a negative impact as well. So both extreme highs and extreme no anxiety at all can lead to poor recall. You want it just to be in the middle on that normal distribution. 44 Thieves studies is where we've got affectionless psychopaths. More of those than controls had a prolonged period of separation from Bowlby. And then a strength of CBT. It's effective, but just a strength. It's effective. It's better when it's used with drugs in a combination, but it does prove to be or have some kind of validity with depression. Okay, so just to get you thinking, this is a Rorschach test. I can never say it. Rorschach? I think so. It's German. It's Freudian. I want you to take the test. All you have to do is look at that picture and then note down what you see. So from looking at that, what can you pick out? Any picture, any image, animal, person, what can you pick out? And the aim of the test, like I said, it's Freudian, is to reveal your unconscious motivations and wishes. Your answers would then be interpreted by the psychoanalyst to see your intentions. So, obviously it's rubbish. I look at that and I don't actually see anything. No, I can't draw anything from that. So that would be terribly negative if I was being analysed. So obviously with a partner, don't discuss. But think about, why has this been criticised as an unreliable measure of personality? So this is still used today. Sometimes it's used in criminal profiling as well. I really don't know why, because they say it's your unconscious, what can you pick out? But that's completely rubbish. There is nothing in that. So why would that be unreliable measure of personality? And that's kind of linking into this first section, which is on reliability. So we need to know the different types, how we go about assessing it and improving it. Questions that they love for reliability and validity are, how do we improve it? It's usually performed very poorly because people know all the types, but not really sure how they would go about making it better in an experiment. So we've got some key terminology that we're going to need. So reliability is about consistency. So how consistent is a measure or a set of results? So how can we be confident in our research? Types, we've got internal. So this is the extent to which something is consistent within itself. So are the questions all measuring the same thing? Are they looking at happiness or are they looking at excitement? So making sure that what you are using is consistent within itself. Whereas external is consistency from one use to another. So if we took that same measure, let's take the strange situation, and we took it to Japan, are we going to find similar results? Is that measure reliable? Also within reliability, we've got inter-rater and inter-observer. So only applies when you're looking at observational studies. They mean the same thing, rater on observer. So when you've got an observation, the way that you go about improving it is having more than one person to look at it. That improves reliability because you are checking it against someone else. So you're making it less biased. Okay, so I've got a couple of sheets on A3 for you to work through and to add some notes to, some knowledge organisers. This is the important bit. So studies you could use. Like I said, research methods are really easy AO3. So if you can be like, oh, they used the strange situation lacks external validity or lacks internal validity, then you are boosting up your AO3 quite simply just from using research methods. So, not getting them confused. So you can have something that's reliable but not valid and valid but not reliable. So thinking about reliability, it's making sure that, let's say, the instructions you give your participants are clear enough so that everyone can make the same cup of tea over and over again. So that's reliability, making sure it's consistent, everyone can do it again and again. Whereas validity, is controlling any variables that may lead to somebody making something other than tea. So making sure that all of the variables are set up specifically for tea and nobody can make coffee, for example. So a researcher wants to find out if boys are more aggressive than girls and they tend to travel to several schools and observe playground behaviour. What factors could reduce my reliability? So what could reduce the chances of me having the same results in every school that I go to? So what's going to be some external factors that are going to impact that? So it could be things like temperament of the children. It could be what they have access to out and about. If there's more stuff they can play with, are they going to be less or more aggressive? So if we take that example and we apply it to each of these aspects that we're going to look at here. So we've got two things we need to know with reliability. We've got how do we assess it to check that things are actually consistent. And we've got how do we improve it. So let's start with the assessing. So test-retest is our easiest way to assess if something is reliable. So what happens is you re-administer the same test, the same questionnaire to the same people, same conditions, but on occasion. So you might give it to them on the Monday, 2 weeks later, give it them again. If it's reliable and we're finding the same results over and over again, or it's similar, we can assume that what we have is reliable. Okay, test, retest, one way of assessing. So there has to be enough time in between your test retest to check if something is actually reliable. So you can't just give it to them on the same day. You've got to give it a good interval of time so that you can actually see if things are changing or if there's actually any point in it. So with quantitative results, what happens then? A correlation can be made. It needs to be more than 0.8 to be effective and significant. So it ain't great unless it's 0.8. So we take the results, we run a Spearman's row. If it's 0.8, we can say that it's significant. When we look at this, is this reliable? Well, yes, because they're all sort of clustered around the middle. And that we'd say that's clustered around the means, the average. Because if you make that into a bell curve, a normal distribution, you can see here that your average is pretty much bang in the middle. So that would be reliable. A second way of assessing is inter-observer reliability, also known as inter-rater. So this is where, let's say we're back to the playground now, I'm observing aggressive behaviour, and they are really open to interpretation. And you have to have more than one researcher to assess the reliability so that it doesn't suffer from subjectivity bias. So you've got more people having a viewpoint. If it's similar, again, through a Spearman's row at 0.8, then we can say we have an effective, significant thing that we are observing. More than one researcher, yes. Have a look at this advert. How many times cheese make reference to? This is another bit of inter-observer. So the behavioural categories will be present here. So I'm observing, I would have a list of behavioural categories. If I'm looking at aggression, kicking, punching, scratching, that I would be tallying off. They're there to, then if someone else came along with those same categories, saw it the same amount of time that I did, then we run a Spearman's row and it came up at 0.8, then both of our judgments are significant and similar. Therefore, it's reliable. So we've got other similar methods you use, but they're called something different. So you've got inter-observer for observations, also called inter-rater. You've got inter-rater specifically for content analysis, and for interviews, inter-interviewer reliability. So basically all it is more than one person judging the same thing. Okay, so that's assessing it. How do we assess something is valid, reliable all the time? The question they love is, how do you improve it? So how are you going to improve the reliability of a certain measure, of a certain design, to make it better? So the type of questions that they give you would be a little scenario, and they would say, how would you go about improving this questionnaire? What would you do? And just like everything, you have to be really specific. So a questionnaire that provides a low correlation when using the test retest, we've handed out more than once. It may be that the questions aren't asking what they should be, or they're a bit too vague. It means that we have to remove them or rewrite them. They might be too ambiguous, they might be too complex. Open questions are usually replaced with closed ones. We get more fixed, unambiguous responses. But that's basically it. So how do you improve the reliability of a questionnaire? You would give it out once more time. You would assess it by running a correlation to see if people are scoring similarly. If they're not, you change the questions, open to close, rewrite them, make them more fixed. With an interview, unstructured interviews have no reliability. Obviously, because we haven't got a set question, we're asking our participants. We're giving them something off the cuff, so we can't really measure that. Structured interviews would be better. So if you had an unstructured interview and they say, how would you improve this? Well, I would use a structured interview. I'd have set questions that aren't leading or ambiguous. You're still going to suffer from interviewers going off the cuff and asking specific questions, but trying to use the same interviewer is, for every candidate, would be the best way of looking at improving it, because then you've got one person's viewpoint, which becomes more specific. With experiments, lab experiments have a lot of control, so high reliability, but the conditions which the experiment sort of takes place in and the instructions, they have to be the exact same, and they have to be standardized to make sure that every participant is doing the same thing. So how would you improve that? So it could be that you check the instructions, they are the exact same. You check the temperature in the room. You make sure that they sit down at the same time, they start it at the exact same time. Field experiments, so when you're out in the field, we're out in the shires having a look round, looking at whatever you would look at in the shires, how many people go into certain shops, always have low reliability because there's not a lot of control. So if you had a STEM on a field experiment, how would you improve this? Well, I'd maybe turn it into a lab experiment. Or after I've got my results, I would then run a lab experiment to just see if I can find anything new or more scientific. The last one, I think, observations. How are we going to improve that? Behaviour categories, making sure they are really controlled, non-ambiguous, not misleading. There's no crossover between categories. Make sure they're operationalised. Pushing is more specific than aggression, so operationalised to hell. And then obviously, like I said, using more than one observer to make sure we have good inter-observer reliability. Perfect. Okay, some questions you'd have a go at. So the bits highlighted in red are just what I would naturally highlight if I was looking at an exam question. There's a lot there. So I would pause this now and read it. And then you've got 2 questions here. So carefully consider the issue of reliability, what is meant by that. Explain how they might have assessed the reliability of their ratings. So 4 marks, about 5 minutes. And I've got the like a model answer on the next page. So pause this now and have a go. And then here. So 1 mark for an accurate description. So saying that they have to, procedures are consistent. Consistency will be the key thing for any question on reliability. And although it's worth 1 mark, people produce too many answers. So 1 mark is literally just something really short and sweet. Then here, we've got a question asking about how we ensure reliability.